The bell over the door gave a soft jingle, old brass against older wood. Samuel Whitaker stepped inside, the cold air clinging to his coat like memory. It was 6:47 a.m., a Thursday. Routine. For the last 12 years, Sam had walked the same path each morning, rain or shine, snow or heat. 2 miles from his small trailer on the edge of town, past the faded war memorial, across the railroad tracks that hadn't seen a train since '98. He'd always stopped at the Morning Light Cafe. Not for the coffee, it was bitter if he was being honest, but for the seat by the window, the familiarity, the simple comfort of being somewhere that felt steady. He wore the same green coat he'd worn since the late '90s. The collar was fraying, one of the buttons replaced by a safety pin. His left leg, gone since 2007, IED in Ramadi, was replaced by a titanium prosthetic with scratches he no longer tried to buff out. Sam wasn't there for pity. Never had been. He came for stillness. For a corner of the world that didn't ask anything of him. Somewhere he could be just a man drinking coffee. But today was different. Behind the counter stood someone new. Blonde hair in a tight bun, eyes sharp but hollow. No smile. No familiarity. Just a hard glance that dropped straight to his leg and stayed there. Sam gave a nod, the kind only old soldiers and small-town neighbors still gave. "Morning," he said quietly. The woman didn't nod back. Instead, she reached for a cloth and began wiping the counter in slow, almost deliberate circles. Then she said it. 5 words, casual and cold. "You're not welcome here." Sam blinked once. "I'm sorry." His voice was soft, unsure he heard correctly. She didn't look up. "We don't serve people like you." The words didn't land all at once. They echoed, slow and sharp, as if the room had expanded and left him standing in it alone. Sam stood there for a moment, his fingers tightening slightly around the handle of his cane. "All I wanted was a coffee," he said, steady. No anger. Just fact. "You'll have to leave." Her tone didn't rise. If anything, it dropped lower, more final. Like the click of a door you hadn't realized had closed. From the corner booth, a man in a baseball cap looked up, then looked away. A young couple near the window froze, their forks halfway to their mouths. No one said a word. No one moved. Sam reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, and placed it gently on the counter. "For the coffee I didn't get," he said. And then, slowly, without a fight, without a fuss, he turned and walked out. Behind him, a faint chuckle came from the far end of the cafe. Someone muttered something under their breath. Sam didn't turn around. The morning outside was cold and gray. The kind of cold that seeps into the bones of men who've known war and silence in equal measure. His limp was more pronounced today. The cold made the prosthetic stiff. Or maybe it was something else. A group of teenagers passed on skateboards, their wheels rattling on the cracked sidewalk. "Out of the way, old man," one of them laughed. He didn't look up, didn't slow his pace. Just kept walking, left, right, left, just like they taught him at Fort Benning 50 years ago. By the time he reached the park bench near Maple Street, his back ached and his fingers trembled. Not from the walk, for what he hadn't said. He sat carefully, pulled out a small leather notebook from his coat, the one he'd carried since Fallujah. Inside were pages of short, clipped sentences, observations, details, orders never given but always obeyed. And this, scrawled on a fresh page. "Thursday. Denied service. No explanation. Just leave. Not because of anything I said. Just because I was me." His handwriting was clean, the way Army Rangers are trained to write. Even now, he stared at the line for a long time. Across the street, families bustled into the pharmacy. Kids pressed their faces against windows at the bakery. Life continued, without pause, without thought. No one saw the man on the bench. Or perhaps they did. And, like the waitress, chose not to. That night, back in his trailer, Sam removed his coat, hung it on the same hook he'd used for a decade, washed his hands, turned on the old radio, just static then a voice. Tomorrow marks the anniversary of Operation Phantom Fury. He turned it off. That chapter didn't need rereading. He walked to the photo that hung above his fireplace. 10 men in uniform, arm in arm, boots deep in Iraqi dust. Only 6 of them were still alive. He stared at it. His prosthetic clicked softly as he shifted his stance. Outside, the rain had started. Again, a stray cat, He named it Colonel, crept in through the cracked door. Sam smiled. "Evening, Colonel," he said, bending down stiffly to scratch behind its ear. "Rough day in the field." The cat purred. Sam poured a cup of tea, returned to the worn chair by the window. Rain traced the glass like fingers searching for a memory. He opened the notebook again. On the next line he wrote, "I didn't fight for thanks, but I thought I at least deserve a seat." He closed the book, exhaled slowly. Outside, under the veil of rain and nightfall, a black SUV rolled quietly down Maple Street. No headlights, no sound. It parked across from the Morning Light Cafe. The engine hummed, then cut. Inside, a man watched the cafe windows from behind tinted glass. He picked up his phone and made one call. "Commander Hale, it's time." The next morning began like any other. Fog clung low to the ground in West Haven, curling over sidewalks and wrapping around lampposts like forgotten memories. The Morning Light Cafe opened its doors at 6 a.m. Sharp, the neon open sign blinking faintly against the gray dawn. Inside, the same regulars took their usual seats. Newspapers opened. Coffee brewed. Muffins were placed behind glass. But something was different. The air felt stiller, anticipatory, like the town was holding its breath and didn't know why. At exactly 6:15 a.m., the first black SUV pulled into the gravel parking lot. It moved slowly, deliberately, its engine humming with restrained power. Moments later, a second vehicle followed, then a third. Matte black, unmarked, but unmistakable to anyone who'd ever known what it meant for men to arrive with purpose. The doors opened in unison. Out stepped 7 men. They weren't young. They weren't flashy. Their movements were tight, practiced, and precise. Shoulders squared, chins lifted. They moved not like they owned the space, but like they had earned the right to stand wherever they chose. Leading them was Commander Marcus Hale, former Ranger captain, now CEO of a high-tier private security firm, and a man who had once pulled Sam Whitaker from a burning convoy in Iraq with a broken rib and blood in his eyes. Today, he wore a dark coat over a pressed shirt. No medals, no rank, but everyone in that cafe knew within seconds this man was someone. The bell over the door jingled softly as the group stepped inside. The young blonde waitress, the one from the day before, was behind the counter again. She glanced up, expecting customers, and then froze. Her face went pale. The leader didn't raise his voice, didn't move quickly. He walked, slow and even, to Sam's usual table, the one by the window, still vacant from the morning before. He reached into his coat pocket and placed 2 objects gently on the tabletop. The first, a weathered photograph of 10 men in uniform, dusty and smiling, arms slung around each other, faces young and firelit with loyalty. The second, a Bronze Star medal, still gleaming, its ribbon folded beneath the weight of memory. The room fell silent. Every fork paused. Every page of every newspaper halted mid-turn. Conversations died like candles blown out. "This man," Commander Hale said calmly, his voice steady but rich with unspoken fire, "stood between me and death more times than I can count." He turned, eyes locking on the waitress who had turned him away. "He came in here yesterday for coffee. You told him he wasn't welcome." The young woman stammered, her mouth opening and closing. I didn't know who he was. I didn't mean." "Now you know," Hale replied. His tone wasn't cruel, just finished. Then silence again. No one moved. From a back corner booth, a local man in his 60s stood slowly. "Last winter," he said, clearing his throat, "when the power went out during the snowstorm, Sam brought blankets to our building. Checked every apartment. Never said a word." Another voice chimed in, this time a young mother. "He fixed my flat tire. Just appeared out of nowhere, then disappeared before I could thank him." A woman near the window. "He leaves flags at the cemetery every Memorial Day. Always before dawn. I've seen him. That's Sam." The room began to shift, not physically, but spiritually. Recognition spread like the light of a slow sunrise. What had been seen but never noticed was suddenly visible. Commander Hale and his men sat down at Sam's usual table. They ordered a full breakfast, eggs, bacon, pancakes, the works. But when it came time to pay, One of the SEALs reached into a leather folder and pulled out a thick envelope. He placed it gently on the counter. Inside, every tip Sam had ever given to this cafe over the last 5 years, carefully tracked and returned, along with a note that read, "You forgot his value." We didn't. The owner of the cafe, having just arrived from the back, stepped forward, clearly rattled. He adjusted his apron nervously. "I was off yesterday," he stammered. "Had no idea this happened." Commander Hale looked at him, expression unreadable. "Then maybe it's time you learned who works for you," he said. "That man's blood is in soil you'll never walk." There was no rage in his tone, just truth. It landed like a sermon. One more voice rose, an elderly woman near the door. "He helped me after my husband passed," she whispered. "Brought wood for the fireplace. Shoveled snow from the steps. I didn't even know his name. I just called him the Quiet One." The SEALs finished their meal, rising together. As they approached the exit, Commander Hale paused. Turned back. Scanned the room. He didn't smile. He just said one sentence. "Heroes don't need you to remember them. But we never forget." And then they were gone. Outside, word had already spread. People had begun to gather in the parking lot, unsure of what was happening, but sensing it was something they'd regret missing. Some looked ashamed. Others just looked. Woken up. None of them spoke. They simply stood, hands in pockets, hats in hands, watching the convoy roll away. Inside, the waitress picked up the medal left on Sam's table. Her hands trembled. Beneath the empty plate, she found a black card, its print gold and sharp. It read, "When you're ready to understand what service really means, give us a call." And in smaller text, "Delta Unit. Always ready. Always watching." That afternoon, Sam sat in his chair by the window, unaware. The rain had passed. The sun hadn't come out, but the gray felt softer somehow. The cat, Colonel, purred in his lap. His tea sat cooling beside him. Then he heard it. Engines. Low, slow, and familiar. He looked up. 3 black SUVs parked just outside his trailer. They didn't knock. They didn't shout. They stood, hands clasped behind their backs, eyes forward. Waiting. Sam stood. Straightened his back. Opened the door. Commander Hale approached. No salute. No formality. Just a quiet embrace. Then 3 words. "We need you." Sam's eyes flicked over the young faces behind him. New soldiers. Young and still learning. Then back to Hale. "Mission parameters?" he asked. Hale gave the smallest of nods. "Rebuild. Restore. Remind." Sam didn't smile. Not yet. But something rose in his chest that hadn't stirred in years. Without another word, he stepped forward. For a long time, Sam Whitaker had been just a man in a coat. To most in West Haven, he was a fixture more than a person. The quiet guy with the limp who swept his own porch even when it snowed. Who nodded to passing strangers but never invited conversation. Who walked with his head high but eyes low as if measuring every crack in the pavement. But something shifted after the SUVs left. The town didn't erupt in a change. It leaned into it slowly, like someone realizing they'd slept through something important and were trying to piece it together. The silence in the morning light cafe felt heavier, not from shame, but from awareness. And it didn't take long before the whispers started. But these weren't rumors. They were remembrances. On Monday morning, a teacher named Linda Barnes called into the local AM radio station. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I'm not sure if this is where to say it, but about Sam Whitaker. He's the reason half my kids had coats last winter. I never told anyone because he asked me not to." The host paused, stunned. The phones lit up. A woman called in next. Her name was Judy Holleran, widow of a Vietnam infantryman named Will. "Every year, I'd find fresh flowers on Will's grave," she said. "Always the same kind, white carnations. I never knew who left them. Not until last week, when I saw Sam walking out of the cemetery with a little American flag folded under his arm." By Thursday, the West Haven Times ran a front-page story titled, "The Man We Thought We Knew, Sam Whitaker and the Legacy of Quiet Service." The article was short but rich with detail. 3 tours overseas, Kosovo, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Bronze Star with Valor. Purple Heart. Led a rescue op that pulled 5 wounded soldiers from a burning convoy outside Fallujah in 2007. Retired as a first sergeant in the 75th Ranger Regiment. And then came the final line. He never mentioned any of it. Not once. That Sunday, Pastor Harlan at the town chapel delivered a sermon titled, "The Servant in the Silence." He didn't name Sam outright, but everyone knew who he meant. "There are men among us," he said, voice steady, "whose scars don't sit on their skin but beneath it, whose heroism doesn't come with trumpet blasts but rusted hinges and walking canes. And when we fail to see them, we fail ourselves." The congregation stood and applauded for nearly a minute. Sam wasn't there, but someone told him about it the next morning. He said nothing, just nodded once. The following week, something small happened at the cafe. Sam came in at his usual time, 6:47 a.m., his gait steady but slower. The door jingled. He took his usual spot. No one said a word, but every patron in the cafe stood up for 3 seconds quietly, then sat down again. Not in protest, not in spectacle, in recognition. Sam looked around slowly, blinking, then lowered himself into the booth. His hands trembled just slightly as he opened the sugar packet for his coffee. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence said everything. Back home, Sam received mail. More than he'd seen in years. Handwritten letters. Children's drawings. A bundle of thank you notes from the 6th grade class. One note read, "Dear Mr. Whitaker, my dad said you're the reason we still live in a free country. I didn't know that until now. I hope you never feel alone again." Sam read it twice, folded it carefully, tucked it into his journal. Despite the attention, Sam didn't change. He still walked the 2 miles every morning, still picked up trash along the sidewalk, still helped the Johnson kids fix their bike chain when it slipped loose near Maple Avenue. But now people saw him, and when they did, they acknowledged him. A nod became a handshake. A quiet thank you became a wave from across the street. The librarian at West Haven Public left a thermos of hot tea by the bench, where Sam sometimes stopped to rest. She never said a word about it, but every day, the thermos was refilled. Then came a town council meeting. Normally, they were uneventful, debates over sidewalk maintenance, school lunch pricing, pothole repairs. But this time, the first item on the agenda wasn't policy. It was a proposal. Councilman Robert Haskins, a former National Guard member, stood and cleared his throat. "We can't undo what happened, but we can ensure no one like Sam Whitaker is ever made invisible again." The council voted unanimously to dedicate the area surrounding the cafe, sidewalk, corner bench, small green lot, as Whitaker Square. There would be a bench with his name. No statue, just a place to sit, to notice, to remember. When they told Sam, he looked down at the folded letter in his hand. One from a woman who'd lost her brother in Kandahar, who had read about him in the paper and said simply, "You reminded me what dignity looks like." He said nothing for a long time. Then softly, "I didn't do any of this to be seen." Councilman Haskins smiled. "That's why we see you now." On the morning of the dedication, the sky was clear. Crisp sunlight filtered through the branches over the cafe. Townsfolk filled the sidewalk. Veterans in uniform, kids holding flags, local clergy, school teachers, and more than one person wiping their eyes before the ceremony even began. Sam stood beside the new bench. His cane rested against his side. Colonel, the cat, watched from a short distance, tucked beneath the bushes. Pastor Harlan said a few words. Commander Hale, standing quietly in the crowd, said none. When the covering was pulled away, revealing the plaque, a hush fell. It read, "Whitaker Square, for the man who asked for nothing, but gave everything." Sam stepped forward, slowly, laid a hand on the cool bronze, then turned to the crowd and gave a single nod. The kind you gave before a mission. The kind that meant, "We're good." The sun was just beginning to lift the shadows from Whitaker Square when the sound of gravel crunching under tires broke the morning quiet. Sam Whitaker looked up from his usual bench, the one beneath the oak that now bore his name. He had just taken his first sip of tea when he saw the familiar black SUV roll to a stop across the street. He didn't move. Didn't need to. A door opened, and out stepped Commander Marcus Hale. Still broad-shouldered, still steady as a fence post, but now dressed in jeans, boots, and a wool jacket. No uniform. No insignia. Just the unmistakable bearing of a man who'd never stopped leading, even when there were no orders left to follow. Sam set down his thermos. "You again," he said, dry as ever. Hale smiled faintly. "Me again." They didn't shake hands. They'd done that already, on sand, in storm, and in silence. "Thought you were done with parades," Sam added. "I am," Hale replied. "This isn't one." He sat beside him, the wood creaking under his weight. For a moment, they said nothing. Birds chattered in the tree overhead. The town moved around them, cars passing, footsteps echoing, but the two men sat in a space all their own. Then Hale said it. "We're starting something." Sam arched an eyebrow. "That's so." Hale nodded. "Rebuilding communities. Mental health outreach. Training younger vets. Showing them what quiet looks like. What survival feels like when the shooting stops. We need your steadiness, Sam." Sam stared ahead, his gaze following the movement of a boy learning to ride a bike across the square. "I'm not who I was," he said softly. "Not sure I'm steady anymore." Hale turned toward him. "No one's asking for steady hands," he said. "Just a steady presence." 2 weeks later, Sam walked into the VA clinic wearing his green coat and carrying his old Army journal. The staff knew who he was by now. The front desk nurse gave a soft smile and a respectful nod as he passed. They had cleared a small room for him. Nothing fancy. Just a table, 4 chairs, and a corkboard. A hand-painted sign on the door read, "Peer Mentor, Samuel Whitaker." He didn't like the title, but he liked what happened inside. The first young man who came in was no older than 27. A triple amputee, jaw tight, eyes darting, voice brittle. Sam listened more than he spoke. He let the silence do the work. When a young man finally asked, "How did you handle it?" Sam answered plainly, "One breath at a time." "And a cat named Colonel." They both chuckled, just a little, but it was enough. The word spread slowly, not through flyers or ads, but through stories. "That older guy at the clinic? He doesn't say much, but he gets it. He taught me how to walk again without telling me how to walk." He never talks about war. He talks about what comes after. Within a month, Sam was visiting the VA twice a week. He met with amputees, with widows, with volunteers who'd lost their direction. He didn't give speeches. He gave steadiness. Sometimes he sat with a young vet for an hour and said almost nothing. But when they left, they looked lighter. Then came the call from West Haven Middle School. One of the teachers, Mrs. Reed, had seen him at the dedication and asked if he'd be willing to talk to her class. Just a short visit. 15 minutes. Sam hesitated, but then he remembered that 6th grade note, the one from the kid who said, "I hope you never feel alone again." So he said yes. He didn't wear a uniform, didn't bring medals. He just walked in slowly, cane in one hand, a folded flag in the other. The students sat straighter the moment he entered. He spoke softly, told them about the time he got lost in a sandstorm in Iraq and ended up following a stray dog to shelter. He talked about writing letters home, about missing birthdays, about learning how to cook with one leg. And when a girl in the front row asked, "Were you scared?" he paused, then answered, "Every day." But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's knowing who you're protecting. The room fell silent. One of the boys stood and clapped. Others followed. Sam just nodded once and whispered to the teacher on the way out, "Next time, I'll bring the cat." In the weeks that followed, Sam received more invitations. A town hall on veteran services, a podcast with a former Ranger, a documentary team visiting from D.C. He declined most of them, but every Wednesday at 3 p.m., he showed up at the clinic. Every Friday morning, he walked by the cemetery and straightened the flags. Every Saturday, he met with a group of teen ROTC cadets under the gazebo near the square. He never told them how to march, but he taught them how to stand. One afternoon, as he sat sipping tea beneath the oak tree, Commander Hale joined him again. This time, there was a different weight in the air. Sam looked over. "What's wrong?" Hale didn't answer right away. Then, "It's not a mission, Sam. It's a movement now. What you're doing, what we're building, it's catching on. Small towns, big towns, but it's coming back to serve again. Quietly. No headlines. Just impact." Sam looked off into the distance. "You sure they want a bunch of old ghosts showing up again?" Hale smiled. "They're not ghosts, Sam. They're anchors. Sam took a slow breath, then said something he hadn't said in decades. Then let's get to work. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Sam sat on his bench. Colonel curled up beside him, purring. A boy walked by and saluted him with both hands, sloppy but sincere. Sam smiled, didn't return the salute, but whispered to the cat, "Looks like we've still got work to do, Colonel." The plaque had no spotlight. It didn't need one. Nestled under the broad arms of the oak tree across from the Morning Light Cafe, the newly placed sign simply read, Whitaker Square, in honor of quiet service. No grand ceremony, no brass band, no marching veterans or podiums. Just a few folding chairs, a thermos of black coffee resting on the bench, and the slow arrival of neighbors who had once passed by Sam Whitaker without a second glance. Now pausing, stepping closer, even kneeling to read the inscription twice, as if memorizing it by heart. The sun filtered down in soft bands through the branches. Autumn had started to nibble at the leaves, scattering gold and rust across the sidewalk where Sam's boots had worn a faint trail over the years. Sam sat in silence on the bench, his bench now, wearing the same green coat, Kane resting beside him, the cat Colonel curled up on his lap. His eyes scanned the street like he always did, not searching, just watching, present. People passed more slowly these days. Not because they pitied him, because they'd learned to notice him. A boy broke away from his father's side and approached. 7 or 8 years old, freckled, backpack bouncing behind him. "Are you the man from the bench?" the boy asked. Sam looked at him, nodded once. "My teacher said you were a hero," the boy continued. "Is that true?" Sam didn't answer right away. He took a slow sip of coffee, set the thermos back down, and gave a soft smile that barely reached his eyes. "Real heroes," he said quietly, "don't ask to be remembered. They just keep showing up." The boy blinked, nodded, then saluted. It was crooked, clumsy, beautiful. Sam returned it without lifting his hand, just a look, a moment. Enough. The boy ran back to his father, whispering loudly, "That's him. That's him." The man turned, gave Sam a long, grateful nod, then tipped his cap. Sam turned back toward the street. Over the next weeks, the town began to change in quiet, meaningful ways. At the library, a new shelf appeared near the front window. Veterans' voices, stories that deserve to be heard. The first book on display, Walking with the Quiet, a collection of essays, one of which was written by Sam himself, dictated slowly to a local college student who'd offered to help. The school added a living history program, inviting veterans to speak in person each semester. Sam was the first guest. He didn't tell war stories. He talked about what it meant to serve someone without being asked. He told them about picking up trash on a windy Tuesday morning when no one else saw it. About how service wasn't a medal, it was a habit. At the diner, where this all began, the waitress was long gone, replaced by a man named Eli, ex-Air Force, who placed a mug of coffee on Sam's table every morning at 6:50 a.m. Sharp. "This one's on us," he always said. Sam always paid anyway. Then came Veterans Day. The town held a modest gathering. Flags, folding chairs, an honor guard made up of high school cadets and retired first responders. A choir sang America the Beautiful. The mayor spoke briefly, but it was the moment after the speeches that stayed with everyone. One of the cadets, a girl no older than 16, stepped forward with a bouquet of white carnations. Without being prompted, she walked across the grass toward Whitaker Square. Sam stood slowly, painfully, without assistance. She didn't hand him the flowers. She placed them gently at the foot of the bench, then saluted. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. Sam didn't give a speech. He never did. But when someone from the local paper asked for a quote, he said this: "I'm not the only one who served. I'm just the one you saw." Winter came, then spring again. The bench remained. The sign stood tall. Children now sat near it after school, some tracing the engraved letters with their fingertips. The young, the old, the curious, each finding something in the silence that words rarely teach. And every morning, without fail, Sam showed up. Same boots, same coat, same quiet strength. Because his story didn't end with injustice. It didn't end with a convoy of SEALs, or a plaque, or a parade. It became something far greater. It became a mirror, held up to a town that had almost forgotten what service looked like when it wasn't wearing uniform. And now, when someone sits beside that bench and asks, "Who was Sam Whitaker?" they're not just told he was a soldier. They're told he showed up every day for others, for purpose, for no thanks at all. And that in the end, some men don't need statues, because the lives they quietly shape are monuments enough. In a fast-moving world that often overlooks the quiet ones, Sam Whitaker's story is a powerful reminder that dignity doesn't need an audience. It just needs consistency. Sam never asked for attention. He didn't speak loudly or demand recognition. He simply showed up every morning with his coffee, his cane, and his quiet strength. He picked up litter, helped strangers, and left flowers for fallen friends. For years, he did this unnoticed. Then one moment of cruelty brought it all into focus, and the town remembered what it had forgotten: that some of the greatest acts of service are the ones done without applause. Sam's journey reminds us that real heroes walk among us every day, in worn coats, in grocery aisles, in silence. They don't ask to be remembered, but once we see them, we can never unsee their impact. In our lives, we don't need medals or titles to make a difference. We just need to be present, to notice, to step in when someone else is dismissed or overlooked. Because sometimes the greatest service we can offer isn't loud, it's steady. And like Sam, we can all show up, one quiet act at a time.